it's not possible to buy insurance when your roof is already on fire. So that's what, like, when you talk about Bitcoin, everyone, oh, it's too volatile. Yes, I want it to be volatile. It goes up and down all the time. I can buy cheap and actually make use of the stressor of the volatility.
A lot of people think anti-fragile means resilient, but that is not correct.
If I drop this bottle on the floor, it might be robust, meaning it will not break, or it might break. If it breaks, it's fragile. If survives, it's robust. But if I drop it and pick it up and get a better bottle, that's anti-fragile. Shit hits the fan, it gets better.
We want to talk about antifragility, the anti-fragile portfolio, how to hedge against systemic risks. And I want to take it into two directions today. The first direction is how can you build an anti-fragile portfolio? And the second direction is how can you build an anti-fragile life? And I think that I have two experts sitting to my right-hand side. And I would like you to introduce yourself. And while you introduce yourself, please also define the word anti-fragile, because I think a lot of people think anti-fragile means resilient, but that is not correct, and I would like to hear it from you. So please, Martin, start.
Thank you. Define anti-fragile.
Okay, I'll start. So I'm Juraj. I do a lot of cypherpunk stuff, and recently I have become a fiction writer, where in the novel where people build a parallel society. So it's one way to hedge against systemic risk. It's called Tamers of Entropy, and about antifragility. So antifragile is something that thrives on stressors. So as you said correctly, it's not robustness. So if I drop this bottle on the floor, it might be robust, meaning it will not break. I'm not going to try it, don't worry. Or it might break. If it breaks, it's fragile. If it survives, it's robust. But if I drop it and pick it up and get a better bottle, that's anti-fragile. So we can. So basically, the like a mathematical definition of anti-fragile is it has a convex response to stressors. So non-linear positive response to stressors. So if, let's say, shit hits the fan, it gets better.
Do you have a concrete example of something in real life which is anti-fragile?
Many things. So when you work out, you do push-ups or you know, lift weights, you break your muscle fibers. So the stressor, the workout of the weight that you were not really prepared for is the stressor. And your body reacts by building more muscle. And it's non-linear, meaning that the muscles that you grow will handle more weight than before. So it's not just fixing the old problem, you will actually become stronger than you were before. So that's one anti-fragile thing. From financial world, if you buy an option, the stressor is volatility in financial markets in general, and because of what an option is, it will become more valuable when volatility increases. It comes from the mathematical properties of the option, but that's like something from the markets that you can see, okay, something crazy is happening, there's a lot of uncertainty, prices are going up and down, the options will gain value, regardless of the price action, where the price actually moves. Just the volatility is enough, the stressor.
All right, thank you. Martin.
Okay, my name is Marcin. So I'm a farmer, technologist, born in Poland, now in the US. So I actually run a project called Open Source Ecology. So we talk about anti-fragility in a sense of all the basic things that one needs to build a life or a civilization from scratch. So we design and build open source industrial machines, publish the plans on the internet for free. So right now we're actually building a facility, 240 people. It's a micro-civilization experiment. It's a productive campus based around R&D capacity. So we teach people all the productive skills. So when I talk about value creation or the ultimate way to generate security in your life, I mean, our biggest thing is learning skills to build things that we use every day, and that's the particular angle. So we work on open source hardware in order to make the economy not only resilient but also anti-fragile in whatever shocks may come up right now with all the different instability around the world.
All right, so I know who to ask when it's about anti-fragile life. Starting with the anti-fragile portfolio. You told me backstage that you were actually a student of Nassim Taleb. Is that correct?
Yes.
And he is the guy who coined the word anti-fragile, correct?
Yes.
So what did you learn working with him about building an anti-fragile portfolio?
Oh, um, so how much time do we have? um, he has a few basic strategies. One thing that I don't think gets through from his books, but it's very important, is exactly what I said about options, but not in a financial sense. So optionality is something that that gives you antifragility basically by construction. So I'll give you a simple example that I told you in the backstage, or you actually, um, that people who had an option to work at home from home, so not necessarily people working from home, but those who had an option to do it. Maybe they were going to the office every day, but had an option to work from home. During the pandemic, the value of this option, they exercised this option, and they were basically unaffected by what was happening. So the optionality is in many forms. Another form of option is an option to live in some other country. So, for example, I have a few backup residencies, and if there's chaos in whatever in Europe, I can move to Paraguay or Panama or some different country. And I already have the option. It's not that I come there and look around. I know the place. I have the work permit, the stay permit, everything. So I have the option. But why is this anti-fragile? This sounds like robustness. But if you have these options, you're basically out-competing everyone who's trying to acquire these options or don't have them at all. Another interesting option is let's say you work with you need electricity for your work, whatever you're doing, computers or welding or whatever. If you can generate your own electricity, that's an option. That's an option. You don't need to buy from the grid. You can make your own electricity. You don't have to do it all the time, but you have the option to do it. Suddenly the grid fails. No one from your competitors or many of your competitors they don't have electricity, so they cannot do anything, and the value of your work goes up. So now if you're a programmer and no one has electricity, then you can charge higher prices because there's more demand than supply. So option has this convex response to stressors, and you don't need to be using the option, but you need to have it before. Like you can, it's not possible to buy insurance when your roof is already on fire, and or it would be expensive. So optionality is one super fast way to anti-fragility.
Okay, so optionality in my life, I understand that, having multiple residencies, maybe even multiple passports. But the first part of this talk is optionality or anti-fragility in a portfolio. Do you have ideas how I can construct my portfolio so that my portfolio becomes anti-fragile?
Financial portfolio. Okay, so so what you need is in finance, one of the main stressors is volatility. So that's what, like, when you talk about Bitcoin, everyone, oh, it's too volatile, and like, yes, I want it to be volatile because if it goes up and down all the time, I can buy cheap and actually make use of the stressor of the volatility. In financial portfolio, one of the basic strategies, you can of course buy options, like put options, so you're downside protected, and then you can maybe make use of some kind of upside. But I don't want people to be trading, honestly. I don't trade options myself either. So let's say what you're worried about on downside of volatility, because no one is worried that their wealth will increase by an order of magnitude. Everyone is worrying that it will go down to zero. So if you have something that is volatile, what you do is you need to basically hedge the downside and be exposed to the upside as much as possible. So Taleb's answer to this, and it's quite nice, I really like it, is called the barbell strategy. So you define for yourself what does it mean a downside protection. So is it price of Bitcoin going down in dollar terms? If yes, then you can buy 80% of your net worth of just cash, just dollars or euros or whatever you're accounting in, whatever your accounting unit is, and keep the 20% in Bitcoin. So what does it do? If Bitcoin falls to zero, you're down to 80% of your net worth. So you protected the downside. The downside is now not zero. You're not gonna stay poor. The worst that can happen is you keep your 80%, and you have the upside, so the 10x of Bitcoin. Of course, not full because you're only 20% in Bitcoin, but the upside is unlimited. Downside is just zero, but the upside, the sky's the limit. Not in practice, but that's the theory. It doesn't have to be dollars. So, for example, even before Bitcoin, I was doing my accounting in grams of gold. So for me, it was gold and Bitcoin. Also 80-20, it's up to you. Like you can do like 50-50. But for the volatile part, you need something with upside potential. So that's definitely not dollars. That's something that can go up. So for most of us here, it's probably Bitcoin. For some people, it's maybe some technological stocks or whatever. I don't know. So you need to define it for yourself, but you need so downside protection and upside potential. That's the two parts. What is nice is you don't have to pay for maintenance. If you do this with options, options expire, you need to rebuy all the time. But with this, you just set it up and you chill out and wait for the stressors to come to increase whatever you're increasing.
Let's switch gears to anti-fragile life. Martin, your project has the capability of open sourcing the plans to build the 50 most important devices needed to rebuild society. Please talk about that.
Okay, so it's called the Global Village Construction Set. You can call it the 50 most important machines that it takes for modern life to exist. So, I mean, anything from a tractor, bread oven, circuit maker, renewable energy equipment, cars, I mean, engines, everything. So we take a look at the whole picture of antifragility from a complete fundamental level. We look at it as, I mean, you don't really need money, you need the things that money can buy. So what if you were to actually have direct access to that fundamental wealth, literally from the dirt and twigs that are under your feet? So one of the first things we built, we started with a raw piece of land. and we had to build infrastructure. So we designed and built an open source brick press, and most of our structures on the facility are made of compressed earth block, which is an advanced building material. And we were able to get it right from the resources. So we think about it in a very fundamental level. And what are the limits to that? I mean, the whole point is all the technology we see here, I mean, steel, concrete, glass, and plastic, and all this, I mean, it all comes from natural resources. So if we were to open source the actual industrial process below our entire economy, then we can access just incredible amounts of wealth right from nature. So it's really about antifragility in the sense of creating regenerative closed loop material cycles, basically the circular economy, or like you might have, who has heard of Fab Labs here? Probably everybody, or no? Fab Labs, there's Fab Cities. Think about cities that build and use, that build or produce all that they use. So it's just taking it to a whole different level. And now with the digital tools, just like Bitcoin has solved money, we're trying to solve, well, what are all the other things you need? You need technology, you need institutions, you need energy, housing, waste systems. We're doing a real life experiment that shows exactly that. So basically a facility with that is a prototype regenerative civilization, all built on open source plans, and therefore you can think about, if it's open source and the model works, replicating this in a networked fashion to create resilience.
Does that mean if I want to build a tractor, I can download your script and I can build the tractor myself?
Download the plans right now at opensourceecology.org. So the first tractor we built, it was way back in 2012. You can build it for about $15,000 in materials. The equivalent from the mainstream world would be like 50,000. So you're saving yourself the money. But the real thing about it is it's not that you buy it. The real thing is the maintenance part, the lifetime design part. Because once you build it, you know how it works, you own it. It's not that the thing owns you, because you can fix it in 5 years when it breaks. I can make it live as long as I like. For example, the engine power unit goes down. Well, because we build in a modular way, absolute modular. So modularity, quick build is some of the keys to what we do. When that happened to me, I started this project because my tractor broke. I paid to get it repaired. It broke again, and pretty soon I was broke. So I decided, no, I can't be sustained like that. So now I can repair the tractor all myself. So if the engine unit went out, I was able to snap the unit out and put a new one in like an hour. No downtime and all that. So the great advantage is the lifetime design, the ability that you actually control this technology in a deep way and can generate as much value as you need out of it. Because, for example, like if you take a commercial skid steer, a construction machine, like we build homes with it, if you buy the one off the shelf, it will last you like 5 years, and you really got to get a new one because it keeps breaking and you can't really fix it, or it's expensive to fix. So for us, it's okay, what if we had that power in our own hands, and we do that? We do exactly that.
Okay, so I understood the tractor example, but I think most people here don't own enough acreage to justify building a tractor. What are the top 3 machines which you would say that these people should buy? Not buy, build.
Build yourself a 3D printer. That's a low-cost, accessible one. Now, right now we're focusing on homes. Now that doesn't sound like something that, sorry, we build a lot of big stuff and heavy equipment stuff. But I would say even take the home, because one of the things we're talking about is swarm design build, swarm builds, which means we can get a large crew of people, like 50 people, and because we do modular design, we can build a house in over a weekend. So if you think about coordinating 50 people times, a weekend, 24 hours, that's like 1,000 hours. And if you can design the build process that way, we're designing exactly this crowd manufacturable, swarmable kind of design that, yes, you can build your own house. How? Well, you've got the open blueprints. You get a crew of people because we're absolutely minimizing the amount of skill it takes to do that. So we build all the house modules in the most simple way. Like, we put a lot of time into just streamlining design. So everyone builds the wall modules in parallel and assembles them rapidly into place. So, hey, build a house.
Who wants to build a house? Okay. Amazing.
Building dozens of them.
Amazing. Juraj, you said optionality is important. What is the most critical step in expanding my optionality when I've never given this topic any thought before?
What is the... sorry?
What is the most critical step which I need to take to expand my personal optionality in my personal life if I have never given the topic any thought before?
Okay. So it's answering a series of what-if questions. And it's actually quite hard because people don't like to ask these questions. I think the best result is you get a life that works regardless of outside circumstance, whatever it is. So there, you have like preppers who prepare for the apocalypse, but they spend so much energy in the preparation that their like normal life suffers because they're building the bunker, but they didn't build the kitchen yet. The key is with optionality, you don't try to predict what is going to happen, because you're going to get it wrong. No one knows the future, and even if you think business as usual, 90% chance, you need to answer what if the 10% chance thing happens. So of course you cannot enumerate all the possible futures that are going to happen. It's not possible. So you need to kind of categorize. Okay, what if the field I'm working on changes? What if I'm out of job and like no one needs programmers anymore because AI takes over, or no one whatever eats pasta and I'm making pasta, so basically you look at your life and you say, okay, what do you need for a happy life? You need somewhere to stay, you need people, you need some sort of communication maybe with the outside world, some sort of interaction with others, you need to eat, you need a safe environment around you, and safe can be, ecological safety, you don't want, maybe there's a flood, doesn't have to be a nuclear bomb. So you basically figure out what a good life means, and then you ask, okay, so what if the place I chose for living breaks in some way? You don't need to predict probability, you don't need to predict how it's happening, but you say, okay, so what if Prague becomes unlivable for me for whatever reason? What am I going to do? And then when you answer these questions, okay, so what are the options that I can get to make this happen? Okay, so if what I'm doing will no longer work, if I cannot make living with my current job, what else can I do? Can I learn something that is unrelated to what I'm doing now and is something that people would want in that kind of situation? Can I move somewhere? Can I make social connections in that other place? What about my family? That's, by the way, quite a common thing that we think about ourselves, but I'm not living without my family, and they need to know what the plan is, and they need to be ready. So with the closest family, it is okay. But what about the parents and other people? You need to tell them beforehand. If there's war, we're leaving, you can come with us, but you need to know in advance. There's no point in talking us into staying, because if there's war, we're leaving, and prepare people for that option. So basically categorize what a good life means, what could go wrong, and what options can you acquire in order to make your life good in any of those situations. That's a simple algorithm. Takes some time to figure it out, but I hope I answered your question.
There's no anti-fragility without proof of work. So I need to be in the city center for a meeting, and I would open up the discussion to the audience with a Q&A section. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. And do we have somebody to hand over microphones? Looks like it. And then the stage is yours.
Thank you. I do have a question to Marcin. What is the difference between your community and, for example, a community like the Amish people in the US? Apart from the religious part, of course.
Yeah, it's about, I think our number one thing would be our acceptance of the level of technology, because we're not saying that we're going to give up on technology at all. While technology is not particularly neutral, it is an absolutely powerful tool. So we believe we can use it. So we talk about things like, oh, we're actually going to be getting into producing photovoltaic panels. Hey, that's like space age and semiconductors. The Amish people don't do that. They're much more. So Amish people, is everyone familiar who Amish people are in the US? It's a religious group, and they do things like still use horses. They don't have cell phones. They might run diesel engines, but they don't drive and things like that. So they're trying to keep the technology level down. And we're saying, no, we're going to accept it all, except make it appropriate. So the common thread is both the Amish and ourselves, we say we want to use appropriate technology. We want to have technology serve our true needs. But we're saying we're going to make the current technology set, which is comfortable, and we don't want to give up anything, any comforts of life, based on the fact that, well, there's plenty of sun. There's like 10,000 times more power than the sun gives us to this planet. So we have plenty of energy, therefore plenty of technological capacity. But of course, at the same time, we're stripping the boundaries of the Earth and getting into global warming and other things. So we have to be very careful that as we design the technology set that we do, that it's regenerative, so that we're actually building soil. We're using renewable energy, producing things locally, just drastically reducing the power consumption of the world to make technology appropriate. So we want to do exactly the same thing as the Amish, except with technology. So we think about things like, well, if we're, take steel. Hey, that's steel here, that's good. We like it. But what we're going to do instead, take a 150 kilowatt solar array that we're putting up on one of our buildings. The induction furnace is one of the technologies in the Global Village construction set. Hey, let's burn our own steel from scrap to make that a completely regenerative closed loop cycle, and be environmentally friendly and have a modern standard of living at the same time.
I need to go. Feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Wiedersehen. Ciao, ciao.
Any more?
I'll tag team. There was another question here.
Yes, really nice project. I heard about it like a couple years ago, like amazing. How far does this project, or how far could this project go? Like, let's say Mad Max kind of thing, like everything goes to shit. Of course, the low-hanging fruit is like to scavenge, get an engine, like for example now for the tractor. How far, like, because with every project you can go like deep, like subcategory, how to build the Kolben, I don't know now in English, but the engine thing. Piston, yes. Yes, that's the question.
So,
how far does it go?
Okay.
In this project, yeah.
how far in the tech stack, how far are we going back down in terms of technology, or when are we going to be finished? Which
No. Like, of course, it's also like a evolving
Yeah.
project. But right now, let's say everything goes to shit.
Okay.
Like you won't even find like a engine or
Okay.
all the engines are found, and you need to build an engine new. Yeah.
Right. So right now we'd be in major trouble if all the supply chains went away, because we're not taking stuff from the waste streams or like recycled engines or whatever. We're buying stuff off the shelf, hydraulic motors, steel from the steel yard, things like that. But by 2028, so we've got a couple of years left, we're aiming to finish it at the level where we can get down to the parts like CNC machine parts, hydraulic motors, doing things like solar hydrogen or compressed biogas for fuel. So basically the full stack where you can build just about any machine, cars, tractors, production machinery, homes, anything else, appliances, all the consumer goods on Amazon. How are we going to do that by 2028? Where right now we have this big break with AI. So it turns out that with AI right now, you can basically say, within human language, you can say, oh, design, create me a generator for these wall modules for this house or these parts for the tractor. And then the AI actually gets you the correct parts. So that's what we're currently developing to take this to rapid pace of development by 2028. But that's a huge price ticket on that. It's going to require a few thousand people. So we're trying to get to that level. Now, after 2028, we see about another 8-year period. And this is where, at a price ticket to open source the entire technosphere, meaning down to spaceships and microchips. Talking about all of that. That's on our radar now, after the stage of 2028. So we see about another decade until we can nail all the rest of the technology. And okay, why are we doing that? Well, we just simply believe technology, it all should be open, so anybody can produce anything. So all your African countries or the South can leapfrog through the technology. So that's where we're at. Goals are ambitious. 2028 for the basic 50 machines.
Yeah, amazing. Like local AI system would be part of it, right? Like I guess you building like local agents and.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we're going along the lines of, we call it iconic CAD. So basically drag and drop icons, where imagine any one of you can now take engineered, graphically represented units. You're just drag and dropping the different parts because we use modularity throughout this whole thing, and then design and build it and fabricate it yourself. Or like say a house, develop the complete blueprints for all the systems, which otherwise would take hundreds or thousands of hours. We're trying to make that available, that you can do that in hours. So taking the design stage down from like days or weeks to a few hours. That's our current goal. Yeah.
Another question at the back there.
I have a question for you on the left. I'm sorry, I'm not going to try and say your name because I will say it wrong. I am one of the suits that was mentioned in the last speech here. I'm going to ask a very kind of detailed sort of like, we call it fund-related question. So there's a guy in the UK called Charlie Morris, who some people here might know, who launched a fund called the Bold Fund. And essentially it's the idea that it holds Bitcoin and gold, and it's inverse risk weighted. So whichever one is the less volatile asset makes up a bigger proportion of the fund of the two assets. And it's essentially a way that he's envisioning Bitcoin can be included within sort of traditional funds and portfolios for people to hold in their pensions, ISAs, and whatever, however people want to hold their Bitcoin in the custody sense, or sorry, in the non-custody sense. And so I'm kind of really asking is, when you're trying to build an anti-fragile portfolio and you want to include Bitcoin within that, do you think that this sort of bold fund or the idea of using it to like counterbalancing it against gold could be an idea that could make that sort of thing work?
Yes, that's the barbell strategy. I think it's quite quite a good way to start if you believe in gold. If that's your downside protected asset. So um, the way to do a vibe check, if that's true for you, the question is how often do you check the price of gold in terms of dollars or euros or whatever you're accounting? So if you are worried about gold going up and down, then it might be good for you. I personally think that Bitcoin is the conservative investment. So, so I'm like I like gold. I have some of it, and it's like with everything, Bitcoin can fail. So I think it makes sense to have something else. I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist at all. But also, I personally believe that Bitcoin is the conservative thing for me. So what I would do is uh, like not 80-20 gold Bitcoin, maybe flip it and like have a little bit of gold and a lot of Bitcoin. That is a possibility. But the custody question is important if you're thinking about antifragility, because if shit hits the fan and you need to go to the fund manager or to the custodian and tell them, I want my money, then what if the country no longer works? What if the fund no longer operates? Like with Bitcoin and with gold to some extent, but Bitcoin is much better in this. You can just take your Bitcoin and leave and go anywhere else. So I think it's wrong to look at this in terms of price only, because self-custody Bitcoin has this property that protects you, and it is one of the things that like people talk about a lot of properties of Bitcoin. And not many people realize that currently it is instant liquidity basically anywhere in the world, like instant with an asterisk. Maybe it takes 2 days. But like if you want to like today go to Uruguay and buy a house, you're not gonna do that with a wire transfer, and you're not gonna be able to do that when shit hits the fan, definitely. But you can go to Uruguay with Bitcoin and buy a house and have it the next day. That's totally possible, and there are people doing it. So it's basically liquidity that magically appears anywhere where you need it, and there is nothing else. Like you cannot do this with gold. Like it's not possible to take like whatever a few coins, like more than a few, but like maybe 5 ounces of gold over the border. You will certainly get caught. I actually some friends checked. They tried to take silver coins on a transatlantic flight, and they were caught immediately. They were under the limit because it was silver, so they took silver coins. But this is a good property, and this is a good way to think about it. And it's answering this what-if question. It's not, how do I make most money? By the way, anti-fragile is not necessarily the best investment strategy. Like you will probably not make most in terms of, let's say, dollar value or whatever accounting unit value. But it's anti-fragile, it thrives in these situations. So yeah, when shit hits the fan, people will probably use this instant liquidity, and they will maybe, even if they're not in Bitcoin, they will maybe want to buy Bitcoin where they're coming from and use it as a liquidity where they're coming to, because maybe the wire transfers don't work. So I think this is, but like mix of gold and Bitcoin in some proportion, I think, is a good idea in any case. Like maybe this Bitcoin will fail. We don't know. We don't really know.
Yeah, there's quite a lot there because you got the so when you're talking about like the custody of the Bitcoin and the gold being not in your own control, I understand that at that point when you're talking about from a money perspective. But for myself, I'm dealing with clients. So I'm training to be a financial advisor in the UK. Will be later this year, and so obviously when we're dealing largely with the investments and the assets of the clients and not necessarily the money that they want to spend, we can help. Like I could tell my clients how you can spend Bitcoin, Strike, and however else you want to do it. But if they want to find a way to add Bitcoin into their portfolio as a diversifier and something that just plays a different role in their portfolio and protects against certain downsides, and just generally reduces volatility and probably also adds additional return with that less volatility. It just seems like it's a great thing to know how to do for our clients, but I'm not quite figuring out how we can kind of navigate that in a way that it actually gets the best thing for our clients.
There are many people who are doing it already, so just look around. I know people in similar situation who have figured it out, so I don't think that's too hard.
Any further questions before we close it out? Yeah, a couple. Okay, cool. This is the last panel, so it doesn't matter if we're getting the time is up here, but
In terms of mobility of gold, I would like to ask, can't you buy gold, for example, in Switzerland, and you leave it there, and you go to Uruguay, and you build a house in Uruguay, and you need some money? So you ring the company in Switzerland, and they just sell your gold, and they put it on your bank account. Don't you think that would work?
It would work in normal situation. It might not work when there's no one to call, when when the cable is disconnected, when someone nuked Switzerland. Like there are many situations where this wouldn't work. Like I would put my gold in Switzerland, no problem, but just be aware. By the way, I personally quite like the dollar-backed stablecoins. In this case, you are losing the self-custody feature, but if you store it with a bank in Switzerland, it's the same thing. You give your gold to someone to store it for you, but you get instant liquidity, and you also have a way to use it as a collateral for a loan. So it's like Bitcoin has both these features. You can both self-custody and have this global instant liquidity. With gold, you need to choose. You either self-custody or you have global liquidity. But you can use these stable coins that are backed by gold. Tether Gold, PEXG, and so on. And you can also use them as a collateral for a loan. So I think this is quite useful. It is less volatile than Bitcoin, so it's a little bit better in terms of collateral if you want to be invested in gold. If you don't like gold, then it's not an option. And it's also quite easy to cash out because it's compatible with other crypto networks. So if there's a Bitcoin ATM, there are even some ATMs that you can send them Tether Gold and just withdraw cash. For example, in Panama, in most ATMs, you can just send them Tether Gold and get US dollars. And also, it is much easier to buy. You can do dollar cost averaging. You can do rebalancing between Bitcoin and gold if you use these stablecoins. So you can do things like okay, I want, let's say, this amount in gold. So you buy the physical coins. And then when you're rebalancing, maybe you have some in Tether gold, and just for the accounting, because you don't want to, buy a gold coin, then sell it a month later, then buy it again. So the small part that you're buying and selling to rebalance, if you want to keep the balance, I don't think that's super necessary, but you can do that. Then these stable coins might be a good use. You need to be aware, it's a gold in someone else's vault. Might be a problem, but if that's what you're doing, then you can choose between these two trade-offs, and it might be a good approach for some people.
There was another question just here.
Yeah, my question goes towards Marcin. I just checked you out in your project, like real quick, and I saw that I could sign up for your newsletter, or I could go to the TUS and, attend your project. But what could be a quick start in between? Like, how can I get involved? How can I get more, like, into your project and follow some, of your best practices? Something in
Well, the
between.
biggest effort right now that we're spearheading is the iconic CAD, just what I described about the AI assisted generation of all the blueprints. So we're actually teaching people how to do that, because AI turns out to be a game changer in this, in terms of you're using human language. We've done a lot of prototypes. We have a lot of different information that now a lot of people can participate in that project, because the barriers to doing that have come down far enough. So I would say go sign up at the newsletter. We're going to do that. We're currently working on a new website, so if you sign up for the newsletter, we'll get you pumped in. But we're going to try to really scale that right now in terms of rapid development on all the different machines and projects. And the focus is on a house right now. Like, after all these years, we're actually building and selling the homes for real customers, and we're intending to get all the different products to enterprise grade. So join us on that if you can't make it on site. Yeah. Otherwise, it's actually we're literally starting a school. So basically, immersion training, anywhere from 10 days up to 4 years, where you're learning all the hands-on build skills of infinite potential. Yeah.
Any further questions? I think we got time for one more. Or if not, we can close the panel and you guys can go for a beer and a burger and whatever else you want to do, and get back here tomorrow early morning for the first full day of BTC Prague. So thank you guys.
Thank you.